You may proceed.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Hinojosa, members of the committee. My name is Raymond Winter, and I am the Inspector General for Health and Human Services. With me today, I have Susan Biles, who is our Principal Deputy Inspector General. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee and to present our OIG budget request. I'm going to start by giving you all a quick overview of our agency, highlighting our accomplishments in fiscal year 24, and then move on to our baseline requests as well as our exceptional items for FY 26-27.
Can you speak a little bit louder, please?
Yes, sir. I sure can. Turning to slide 3 of our handout, you can see our vision and our mission. Quite simply, I'm not going to read this to you, but quite simply, our mission is to protect the $50 billion in annual spend on health and human services. And on slide number 4, you can see why that needs protecting. There are national studies that show that up to 10% of the spend in any given state is lost due to waste, fraud, and abuse. So in Texas, that means up to $5 billion annually is not going where it's supposed to go. Every dollar that is not going where it's supposed to go is a loss to taxpayers. And of course, it's a loss to the most vulnerable among us who require these services. Slide number 5 has our OIG priorities, and slide number 6 details some of the tools in our toolkit to help us do our job. I'm not going to go into those, but again, I'll be happy to answer questions that you may have about that. I'd like to turn now to slide number 7, which are performance metrics for the year that was just completed, fiscal year 24. We recovered over $442 million for taxpayers through our efforts. That's a return on investment of approximately $5.44 for every dollar devoted to our operations. Additionally, we conducted over 17,000 client and provider investigations. We completed 34 audits, and we screened over 76,000 provider applications. On slide number 8, you can see our baseline budget request. We are requesting $29 million in general revenue funds and $68 million in all funds per year. This baseline request does include a case management replacement system that is included in the base budget, and I want to thank you for including that. That will greatly increase our efficiency in our Medicaid investigations. We have 8 exceptional items that are not included in the base budget, and I'll be going into those here in the next few slides, and they are also addressed in the appendix that we provided to you. On slide number 9 is an exceptional item that will provide a method of finance adjustment for us. We have been facing an issue over the last several budget cycles where we do not have enough funding in general revenue to pull down our entire appropriation. We've been filling this gap over the last several years with salary lapse, but that is not sustainable for us in the long term. And so we're asking for your assistance to close this funding gap for us permanently moving forward. On slide number 10 are our staffing-related exceptional item requests. We are seeking funds to provide targeted salary increases, as well as additional full-time employees to help us processing the recoveries that we're making for taxpayers and debt collection activities. We're seeking funding for auditors to meet the requirements of Senate Bill 26, which you may recall from last session, requires us to conduct audits of LMHAs and LBHAs every 5 years. We have an increased workload as a result of that, but we did not have the funding to accomplish that mission. So we're asking for additional auditors to meet those metrics. We're also looking for funding for increased staffing in the area of provider enrollment, data analysis, our legal department. We're looking for more lawyers and more peace officers for our state center's investigative team, which is kind of the flip side of what the discussion was about a moment ago about violence against the staff. Of course, our state center's investigative team are our peace officers who protect the clients against allegations of abuse, neglect, and exploitation by staff. We're also looking for funding for an electronic discovery tool because we are increasing our operational tempo in our legal department to hold bad actors accountable. We are finally, on this point, on this slide, seeking to add our peace officers. We have about 39 peace officers, those skid officers that I just mentioned, and others, and add them to Schedule C. that would allow our peace officers to have competitive salaries. Across the board, our peace officers are on average paid 42% less than other peace officers at other state agencies. And Senator Perry has agreed to carry our bill, Senate Bill 502, that would make the appropriate statutory changes, and we thank you for that. Slide number 11 is a slide that details our information technology exceptional items. The additional funds that we are seeking would improve our case management system for our surveillance utilization review unit. These are our nurses that do surveillance utilization review in hospital settings, long-term care settings, and acute care settings. In fiscal year 24, this unit recovered over $20 million for taxpayers. The current systems that they have in place were developed back in 2012, and they don't talk to each other. They cannot be integrated with one another on those platforms. So our surveillance utilization review personnel have to switch back and forth between these platforms. They have different functionality. That shifting back and forth wastes time and impacts our productivity. Also on this list, we are seeking funding to provide us with the ability to perform large-scale analytics projects. For example, currently, if we wish to pull 3 years of Medicaid acute care claims data, that could take up to 10 days to complete the task. With the improved technology that we are seeking, we hope to accomplish this in just minutes. That would enhance our ability to observe patterns, trends, and anomalies across large data sets. It would also include funding to allow us to automate repetitive, high-volume manual tasks to increase our efficiency. That concludes my presentation. Ms. Biles and I are happy to answer any questions you may have. And again, in the appendix, there's detailed information about each of the exceptional item requests.
Senator Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have this answer, but I want to make sure I have this answer. So they are strictly civil and criminal from the Medicaid fraud, basically. Is that the majority of your workload?
I'm not sure if I would say that's the majority of our workload. If the question is...
Yeah, so let me ask it just directly, and I know what the answer is, but I'd love to hear maybe. We had a lot of conversations about backlogs with some of the agencies on abuse and neglect from the client perspective, the provider, those kind of interactions. Y'all don't really do any of that. Are y'all in a position where you could help in that, even though it's not your primary mission?
Senator, I'm still not sure if I fully understand.
There's a backlog of 1,200 folks. I'm assuming it's on the adult probation kind of conversations and things, of people that have reported possible neglect and abuse. It's over a year old. That's not y'all's wheelhouse.
Yes, sir.
Are y'all trained in a way that could help pitch in?
I think that's a conversation that we could have with the executive commissioner to see if we could assist. We have regular conversations with the commissioner at HHSC. We meet on quite frequently. Any way that we can assist, we're happy to explore opportunities to assist.
So from a provider, if I'm a provider and I've got 4 beds and 3 of those 4 people contacted, I think it's dishes, I don't remember which one it is, I think we're being abused. State's got a 1,200 backlog of those plus more. Is that something y'all could help the agency go after the provider to see if that's true? And if it's not, I'm okay with that. I don't expect it to be, frankly. But if it was something, until we get that agency where it needs to be, we could triage ourselves back to normalcy.
So I think that
Please
one of the
identify
different.
yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry, Susan Biles, Principal Deputy Inspector General for OIG. Our peace officers who work in our state supported living centers and state hospitals investigate A&E when it's an employee on client. That's really the only A&E work that we do. It's more on the fraud, waste, and abuse for our investigators on that side. So, I mean, obviously, we're very happy, as IG Winter said, to talk with the executive commissioner if there's any assistance there. But it's apples and oranges a little bit.
Sure.
Our staff's not really trained.
And I expected
A&E
that. I
world.
didn't know. I thought I'd ask. You never know what you get in this place when you ask. You might have said, sure, we can do that. So there you go. But I wasn't expecting that. In your fraud, waste, and abuse, your analytics, your dollars in, dollars out to look at antidote one-offs and go after and recover $442 million for the state. That's awesome. If you were to see indications of possible things that don't add up to mission, and there was, for like a provider problem in the way of delivery of that service care, otherwise, y'all would refer that, I assume, and
Correct. If we see something that looks like A&E, we would refer it to regulatory for investigation. And we did a series of audits 3 or 4 years ago looking at group homes, and we identified an issue immediately when we went on site, and we called and waited for regulatory to come on site to take care of this.
so it's not something unfamiliar, but it's not your primary mission. I get it.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Senator Nichols.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding the pay for peace officers, Schedule C, guess I'm not that familiar with it. Can you explain that to me a little bit?
I believe I can, yes, sir. Across the board, it's my understanding that there are only about 177 peace officers out of the 5,000 or more that are state employees that are not on Schedule C. And my understanding about what that means, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, our peace officers are not on Schedule C, and they're paid across the board 42% less than other state employee peace officers across state agencies in Texas. That makes it very difficult for us when we lose an officer to attract recruits. It also has an impact on us on retention. If an officer that is currently working for us has the opportunity to go to another state agency that pays higher.
And so the bulk of these other state employees, I guess, would be DPS and Texas Rangers, things like that?
I imagine the DPS and the Rangers that are part of DPS are already on Schedule C, yes, sir.
Do I? Yeah, we have law enforcement officers all over that are not necessarily state. You know, your deputies, county deputies, sheriff's officers, city police. Now we have law enforcement scattered through schools. We've got them in other agencies as well. Are they doing, I think you may have been answering a question to Senator.
I think there's a state salary schedules.
Okay, state salary, but all states employed, law enforcement people aren't on it. And I'm trying to understand why.
Local police are not state employees.
Do I?
No, the local police officers are not state
I
employees, nor
understand,
are
I
sheriffs.
understand that, but they're still doing the work out there. They're still targets. And so the type of work that your law enforcement people are doing, you think puts the same type of danger and level of fraud, working with the bad guys that they, I'm trying to understand why they're not. It's,
Well, I don't understand why they're not either, Senator. That's a good question. The information that I have is that out of the 5,000 plus or minus Texas state employee peace officers, DPS, at the Office of Attorney General, at the Department of Insurance, at the Alcoholic Beverage Commission, the Department of Criminal Justice, the Comptroller of Public Accounts, and Parks and Wildlife, all of those state employee peace officers are on Schedule C.
okay, that makes sense to me either. I was just wondering if there was a different level of work they're doing that for some reason somebody didn't justify putting them at that same level.
I can't speak to that.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Answer my question.
Senator Perry, is that
I don't have the history of it. I don't know how long we've had a OIG and fully staffed at that level, how long ago you came into existence. I think to Senator Nichols' question, and you can answer this, I would assume when you're dealing with multi-million-dollar fraud conversations that sometimes there is a risk of guns and exposure to violence. Just people kind of go down hard sometimes. But do y'all come across that element in your work?
Yes, sir. There's always an opportunity for a first responder to encounter a situation, especially we've been talking about some of the violence that we're seeing in for example, the SSLCs, the state hospitals. We do have peace officers that are allocated to us for Medicaid fraud investigations. Our peace officers are, like other peace officers, they are armed, they carry a badge, and they have a duty to respond to situations as they see them and encounter them.
You may not know this, and it's just coming through my mind. Are you seeing a syndicated cartel kind of influence in some of the Medicaid work? Have you come across anything in your investigations? Because they're into everything, money laundering. But have you had any casework of recent 2 years that you could point to? It's more of a syndicate rather than an individual provider committing a fraud?
I know that we have one of our OIG peace officers that serves in the Valley on a multi-jurisdictional task force with both state and federal law enforcement partners. I can get some information back to you in response directly to that question, but I certainly know that we have one of our very well thought of, very highly recognized, and
Yeah, I'm just interested if it's creeped in to something this level of, because a lot of cash moving through these systems. So
Senator
Yes, sir.
Perry, I think some of those prosecutions have been taking place by the federal government. Senator Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we're talking about $5 billion that's being stolen, and we're recovering about $400 million. Is that how I read the chart?
Yes, sir.
That's a little less than 10% in there. How do we compare to other states?
The 10% number, Senator, is a national number from the National Healthcare Anti-Fraud Association, which is has government participants as well as private sector participants who came up with that number. So that 10% number is an across-the-board national board. As far as our rates of recovery go, I don't have anything that I can answer your question right now and say that we're leading the pack or that we're not leading the pack across the states as far as our rate of recovery.
So how do you measure your success? How do you figure out whether what you're doing is meaningful? I mean, it's nationally that's a small number. I would sure hope Texas would be doing better than that, because we're talking about spending. Is the 400,000? Is that also just a national number?
The 442 million.
Yeah.
That was in Texas. It
That's
was
Texas.
recoveries for Texas taxpayers. Of course, a portion of that goes back to the federal government because Medicaid, of course, is heavily funded by the United States.
Yeah.
Your question is a great one, sir, about how do we measure our success. And one of my goals as the Inspector General is to build on the success that our organization has had over the last 5, 6, 7 years under Sylvia Kaufman, who was the Inspector General until October of 22, when I came into office after she stepped down, retired. And I want to build on that success, and I want to build on our measurable return of value to taxpayers. I want us to recover more money. The $5.44 figure that I mentioned in my remarks is we have recovered $5.44 for every dollar devoted to our operation. One of our goals is to increase that by catching more bad guys and holding them accountable in part. That's part of what we do. It's a big part of what we do, is when we find people that are taking advantage of the system and are responsible for that loss, that 50% loss, to find them, hold them accountable, and get the money back.
That's great. Those are noble goals. How are you going about developing, improving that? Are we looking at what other states are doing? Do we collaborate with them? Or what's the feedback that says, well, this worked back when we had payphones involved, but we don't have payphones anymore. So this thing we're doing is really kind of should go the way of the payphones, and let's do something how do we keep ourselves ahead of, because I know it's a very sophisticated operation out there. The technology, helps the crooks as much as it helps the good guys on an equal basis. And so they have access to it just like we do. And they're going to stay a step ahead of us. If nothing else, their personal incentive is greater than what it is on our side. to do this. So we have to work real hard to get better than what they are. My question is, what is it going to take in order to run that up so that it really, I mean, if they're getting $5 billion and it's less than 10% penalty to them, that's not much of a deterrent. It's like, this is a big deal, you know. We can do this all day. You know, it's like what we see with the cartels laundering money through our lottery system. You know, they may buy $1 million worth of ticket and be happy they only won $100,000 because they now have a clean $100,000. Well, that's what I see here is so what can we do? What can the legislature help you do, or are there things that legislature has done back when technology when things were different, that are now in your way, that would be helpful if we would move them out of your way and give you more latitude to be able to go after more? And do we need to look at stiffer penalties for things that we once thought, well, we'll slap them on the hands and because we expose them, they won't do it again? Well, we know that doesn't work. So maybe it's time to change the things we figured out don't work and start looking for new things that we don't know whether they'll work or not, but we won't know unless we try them.
Again, an excellent question, Senator. A couple of responses. First, one of the ways that we measure our success and compare our situation in Texas with other states is we participate in an organization called NAMPI, which is the National Association of Medicaid Provider Integrity, and it's other state IGs and it's other state law enforcement personnel that are looking at these questions. So we have a collaboration with them. We have an active collaboration with our federal partners at CMS. As to your question, and we're constantly looking at what we're doing and looking where there are ways to improve it. On the technology front, we have a very robust data analytics operation within OIG, our own employees. I'd refer you to slide number 6, which has our toolkit and has where we have our personnel. Our personnel are located around the state of Texas at about 25 different locations, in addition to our headquarters here in Austin. And so we've got ongoing processes to tackle this problem. To your question about what you can do and what the legislature could do to assist us, we are part of a three-legged stool here at the Office of Inspector General. The state of Texas has basically 3 ways to combat Medicaid fraud. There's a administrative remedy, which we run here at the Office of Inspector General, and that's what we're speaking to. But there are also 2 very important components of that 3-legged stool that belong to the Office of Attorney General. They have a civil enforcement effort, and they also have a criminal enforcement effort. And so we have active, ongoing liaison and communication and coordination with the Office of Attorney General. That $442 million that I mentioned in my remarks that we've been speaking of is just what we recovered at OIG. And I can't speak to their numbers and their metrics, but we're always cooperating and coordinating and looking at what is the appropriate remedy for a particular category of misconduct, for actions that a person commits. A person can commit an act that constitutes misconduct against the Medicaid program for which any one of those 3 remedies may be available. And so we constantly have a liaison and a conversation about that. The statutes that the Attorney General enforces have been upgraded over the years. I spent 24 years at the Office of Attorney General, so I'm somewhat familiar with that civil statute. And it's been upgraded, it's been improved and enhanced over the years. Our statute has been around since 1987, right around the time I was getting out of college, and it has not been upgraded in any substantive way since the late 1980s.
Let me just say.
Do you have thoughts
City Hall. Yeah, actually, we have passed legislation reforming the OIG in the past, and every session we come back and make adjustments to the statutes to make sure they have the proper tools to be able to prosecute when they come up with issues. So we've been doing that on a pretty much on a regular basis.
Okay. I mean, hear him say no real changes since 1987. And we can talk all day. If you have any thoughts on how you're operating today, and you feel like you're not 100% in the direction you need because of a statute or something, or something has changed that now make this statute different than what it was intended for, we can't fix it if we don't know about it. And I just ask you, come talk to us. My door is wide open anytime, and I'm sure there are others here that would be willing to talk to you about what we could do in continuing what's been done in the past to make sure that to help you get up to collecting all that money, because that's taxpayer money. It's not our state money. It's not the federal government's money. This is the taxpayer that are getting cheated.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Senator Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So first of all, to echo what my colleagues have said, I think I've said that a lot, but we really appreciate you going after fraud. Anything we can do to enhance your ability to go after fraud, which again, the victims of that are going to be the Texas taxpayer, and we would like vigorous enforcement of that. To Schedule C, to my fellow members, I was there when the beginning of Schedule C, and to answer some of the questions. So there's three basic schedules. Schedule A is your administrative. Schedule B is your directors, professionals of that nature. And Schedule C is your patrolmen, your investigators. It's law enforcement only. It's Schedule C. And that applies to state peace officers and sheriffs, PDs who TICO licenses everyone. So in this is a state classification for state peace officers. And when it first came out, it was DPS, the state game wardens, TDCJ and OIG, and TABC, whose agencies were involved actively in providing parity. It was used along the military model, where if you were a captain, there's the same captain no matter what agency you were with. If you were a patrolman 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's the same as any. So it followed that logic. So that's how Schedule C came about. And since then, to answer the question is why did not everybody get in on it? It's because a lot of other agencies didn't want to get in on it. They didn't want to pay for that. So those that did in the beginning is where DPS, Texas Game Wardens, TABC, Office of OIG did. And so that was the basis of Schedule C. So since then, a lot of other agencies have joined. I've joined bills myself, and I agree with Senator Perry. So these investigators you have are investigators along the line, the state classification of a peace officer under Schedule C, which is a patrolman up to investigators and up to the rank of major. So that's how that works. And I totally support the idea that it allows you to recruit and retain quality investigators so they can go after and get more than 10%, Senator Hall, and continue to sharpen the sword and do what they need to do with Schedule C officers of Texas being amongst the best. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Flores, for the explanation. Senator Cockroach.
Thank you so much. Thank you to you and your office for what you do. We've had several meetings over some of these issues, and thank you to the members for engaging. If we were looking at this $5 billion, where is it most heavily concentrated? 1, 2, 3, 4 different categories. Where would you rank those?
Thank you for that question, Senator. I don't know that I can rank them, but there are certain things that we see pretty commonly particularly in the Medicaid fraud area. There's what we call upcoding, and that's quite, best example of that is they bill us for the Cadillac of services, and what they really provide is the Yugo. Okay, that's upcoding. There's a category of misconduct that we see in the Medicaid space called unbundling. And that is where an example of that, one example is in the hospital setting. In an emergency department, there's a thing called an E&M code, which is an evaluation and management code. That E&M code includes the cost of giving an injection. From time to time, we see a situation where a provider will bill us for the E&M code, but then also add an a la carte charge for the injection, which was included with the E&M code and should not be billed separately on top of. That's called unbundling. We've got just some cases where they bill us for the Cadillac and they don't even deliver the UDCO. That's billing us for services not delivered. I've got other examples here. Let me see. We've got adding modifiers to certain codes that allow them to exceed whatever the threshold or cap is for how many times a certain service can be delivered to a certain patient within a certain time frame. Occasionally we see, not just occasionally, sadly, we see this quite often in our work, where somebody commits misconduct by adding a modifier to the bill to overcome an edit. If that modifier was not added, then the bill would not be paid, so the provider will sometimes add a modifier to get it through the process. Those are some examples of the kinds of misconduct that we see in the Medicaid space.
Do we see it ever in prescriptive drugs or DME or any thing like that?
Yes, ma'am. And the way we catch that is through inventory analysis, inventory audits. They're not really audits by our audit team, but they're reviews conducted by our investigative team. And in the pharmacy space, for example, it can be a situation where a pharmacist bills us for the branded drug, but actually provides the cheaper, less expensive generic drug. Situations where the pharmacist bills us for the branded drug, but then exercises that pharmacist's own discretion and prescribes a substitute drug that wasn't even what was on the prescription at all, whether brand or generic. We catch these things through inventory analysis. If they billed us for 10 units within a certain time frame of the brand, then we can go back and we can look at their inventory records and find out, well, they only ever bought 5 units of that drug. So they couldn't possibly have dispensed 10. So when we have a discrepancy like that, we do a further investigation. And we've had a number of cases that we call our pharmacy inventory analysis cases that have been publicized in our reports that fall in that category.
When you say $5 billion, you answered Senator Hall. You said, well, y'all are around $400 million that you've been able to recover. About 10% will give you the benefit of saying it's 10%. The OIG's numbers are not included in that. Is that correct? I'm sorry, the OAG's numbers.
That is correct, Senator. Our number of $442 million in recoveries for fiscal year 24 is just ours. It does not include the Attorney General's numbers.
Okay, thank you. And I do think, Senator Hall, that we do have a senator working on some update statute that we're hoping to come our way, but we'll be working with you and the OAG's office on some of those issues. Lastly would be, last session we passed Senate Bill 26. Senate Bill 26 gives the OIG the ability to audit our LMHAs and our LIDAs. I know that y'all have gotten started on that. It was at least audit every one of them every 10 years. Is that what y'all are sticking with, and where are y'all on that process?
Thank you for that question, Senator. We are seeking, it's now 5 years. Late in the session, last session, it was reduced from every 10 years to every 5 years, and that's what we're operating on. We have requested additional funding in our exceptional items for more auditors. We have a metric of 34 audits per year, which we have hit. We hit last year, and we're gonna hit it again this year. And that includes doing audits of LMHAs and LBHAs. But we are seeking additional funding for more auditors to hit that 5-year goal of doing all of those organizations.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate what y'all are doing on that. It's invaluable feedback on the 39 LMHAs and, making sure that the money we use here is pushed out and actually used for its purposes, which it's been a process of trying to get that information back. So this is going to help us make sure that we stay on course and get those monies to most importantly, to get them to the clients that need these services. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. We're going to move on to our next agency, Marcia McLean, Executive Director of Texas Civil Commitment Office, and Jessica March, Deputy Director. Y'all could come on up.